Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday to you. It is the end of another week in the Word. It is the end of our study of the book of Genesis. I'm a little sad. I've really enjoyed Genesis with you, and I can't thank you enough for joining me in this journey. We'll finish up Genesis and talk about what comes next. Okay, Genesis chapter 50, verses 14 to 26. I just love this. So they're coming home from the funeral, right? And all of the family of Israel, the sons, Joseph, that whole entourage returns to the land of Egypt. And instantly, Joseph's brothers become a little bit nervous, right? Because this whole time, they can't be quite sure that Joseph is truly forgiving them. Perhaps he's only trying to appease and please his father. And now that his father's dead, now they're worried again, right? You know, what if Joseph now comes back at us? I would say in some ways they are just continually, plagued by guilt and shame because of their sin. I think on the other hand, again, this is a family that deceives, all day long. And don't forget that Joseph, man, he spoke Egyptian to them for a solid year. Like he spoke Egyptian and acted like he was not their brother. I mean, so he's capable of deceiving and keeping it going for a long time. So even though I'm thinking, come on, boys, let it go. He forgives you. I kind of understand why they'd have some thoughts. He spoke Egyptian for a solid year, Oh my. So notice what they do. They send a message to Joseph, like they've been traveling with them, in the same minivan from Egypt for days, but now all of a sudden they're not going to go straight to him. Now, why is that? It's because they're scared of him. They really are afraid that he will now turn back around and get revenge. And so they send a messenger to Joseph with this message that says, by the way, before your father died, now, I don't know, is this true? Is it? I don't know. I don't know. From everything I read, Joseph was there when Jacob died. He was there. I mean, the promise was Joseph's going to be the one to close your eyelids. I think Joseph was there. So at what point Jacob, had this message for Joseph that he said to the brothers, but I don't know, But at any rate, the message is from the brothers, and it's like, oh, wait, by the way, before your father died, your father, not our father, your father. Notice what they're doing. They're not making any kind of appeal on the basis of the fact that you're our brother. It's still on the basis of, you need to do this because of your father. They don't really believe that they have any ground on which to stand to ask for a favor as brothers, but they do still think that maybe Joseph will do it for the sake of his father. So do this out of your obligation as a son, not out of your obligation as a brother. You know what I'm saying? At any rate, this is the moment where they say, we beg you to forgive our sin. Now, they have shown remorse. They've fallen down. They've offered to be slaves. They've done all that before. But am I reading this correctly? I don't think they've done this before. I don't think they have come right out and asked for forgiveness. But they do that now. And you could say, is it necessary? Is it too late? I don't know. But I don't know if it's ever too late to say you're sorry. And so they beg for forgiveness here. One more time, Joseph just breaks down and weeps. One more time, they throw themselves down, volunteer to be slaves. Now, I remind you, the book of Genesis is written by Moses for the slaves coming out of Egypt. It's just multiple times that the children of Israel throw themselves down to be slaves, and every time Joseph says, "Get up." In other words, no, you're not going to be slaves like this. You're not going to become slaves. I think that's really interesting how they continue to act that out and continually, no, you're not going to be my slaves. In the book of Genesis, in Joseph's story, remember, Joseph, takes in Egyptians as slaves. So Joseph makes the slaves of Egypt, but he will not make Israel slaves. I think that's just kind of an interesting kind of irony. And so Joseph continues to reaffirm the fact that they're forgiven. And again, one more time, that amazing theology of the Joseph story. And I think the whole book of Genesis is repeated. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. Now, that word meant, is used twice here. I think it's really interesting, and I think it says something important about forgiveness and about the purposes of God. First off, what you meant for evil. Joseph completely forgives his brothers, and never think that's not a possibility. It is always your obligation to forgive, and you can always forgive because of Jesus, not in you, but because of God, And even when we forgive, often we confuse like excusing, making excuses or erasing or, whatever. Joseph takes their offense completely seriously. What you meant for evil. In other words, you meant to do that and you meant to harm me. When I'm forgiving, I used to say, I know you didn't mean to hurt me. Somebody, just came at me with a chainsaw, but I'm like, I know that you didn't really mean to scare, that's what we do. We were kids then and y'all didn't mean that, No, Joseph says, you meant this and you meant it for evil. I think that's an important step in forgiveness. I don't think forgiveness has to discount or diminish the offense. I think forgiveness takes the offense with utter seriousness. You meant this and you meant it to harm me, but God meant it for good. I think this is beautiful, and especially at the end of the book of Genesis, right? Because at the beginning of Genesis, you have Satan himself who slithers his way into the garden to undo all of the beauty and glory that God had made. Satan intended for evil to somehow destroy the fellowship and glory with which the man and woman were created, right? Satan meant to undo what God had made, but understand, God will have his way. There's nothing anybody can do to thwart God in his intention to bless Joseph's life. And there's nothing that anybody can do, not even you yourself. You cannot thwart God's intention to bless your life. What God means to do, God's going to do. God will have his way. I love that. And that's kind of the theology of Joseph's story. I think it's the theology of the book of Genesis. Nothing can thwart what God is going to do. God will work his purposes out. It may take a lot of time. He may have to overcome a lot of hard-headedness and a lot of obstacles that we ourselves put in his path because of our sin. But God's going to have his way. You meant this and you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. God will have his way. I just love that. So at the end of the story, Joseph's final dying words, please don't leave my bones in Egypt. Don't leave my bones in Egypt. Hebrews chapter 11 points out that, by faith, Joseph, as he was dying, looked forward, to the land of promise, and asked that his bones be carried there. It's that idea that even in death, faith looks forward. This is how you die, y'all, right here. Joseph didn't say, oh man, I've had such a good life. I'm so glad before I died, I got to see Egypt, man. It's an amazing place. I'm sure glad before I died, I got to see. No, even in death, he's not looking backwards, not even looking at the blessings of the present moment. In death, Joseph looks forward to the land that God has promised. That, my friends, is how you die in faith. Not looking back, you look forward, because I'm telling you, death is not the end. Joseph knows it, and you better know it. So faith looks forward. And at the end of the book of Genesis, there's this amazing promise. Because remember, from here on out, children of Israel are going to suffer slavery. They're going to suffer tribulation and trials and testing, but they're going to come back to the promised land. I'm telling you, God is going to have his way, and he intends to bless Israel. Now good? It's Genesis, y'all. We finished Genesis. What are we going to do next? Well, next, I'm going to take next week off. I don't do this because I'm lazy or because I don't enjoy coming back to you, but as we go through this together, I feel an obligation as kind of the teacher to be ahead of the game, right? So I got to get ready. I need to get ahead of you. Now, some of you said, let's do Exodus. I remind you, in 2020, we did Exodus. So we've been all the way through the 10 Commandments. We didn't do the last part of Exodus, but I'm keeping up. I'm not promising, but I'm planning at this point to sort of do the whole Bible with you all. And so I want to pace this well. I don't want to do all the good stuff up front. I'm not saying it's not all good. It's God's word. It's all good. I love it all, but I'll be honest with you, I don't love it all equally. Some of it is hard, and I'm aware of the fact that some of this is difficult to sort of, plow through together. So I want to make sure that we don't just do everything we want to do up front. Some of you have said Revelation, and I sort of like the idea of doing the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. Do Genesis and do Revelation. But I think I want to save Revelation too. Again, we got a lot of Old Testament, less New Testament. And so I think it's important that, as I say, we just sort of pace ourselves and make sure that we are sort of following a good course so that we continue to stay fresh and excited to be in the Word. Does that make sense? So come back with me on Monday, April 11th, and let's begin the book of, you ready? Ezekiel. Nobody was asking for Ezekiel. I don't know. Nobody asked for it. But Ezekiel is interesting. Ezekiel is weird, and Ezekiel will be fun for us, and God is going to speak to us. So we're going to come back Monday, April 11th, and we are going to begin going verse by verse to the book of Ezekiel. So start reading ahead. You ready? I will spend next week getting ahead of you so that I can begin with something good to say on Monday, April 11th, the book of Ezekiel. Okay, so do chapter 1, and I will see you then, Monday, April 11th, 10 o'clock, Lord willing, for 10 with Tim. Have I mentioned lately how much I love you guys? Listen, thank you for the book of Genesis. Thank you. We've been doing this since the beginning of the year, so it took us some time. But I'm telling you, time spent in the Word and time spent with you, I consider time well spent. I'll see you April 11th.